Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Concussion Nerds podcast. And this one's going to be a little bit different. We are in the month of December. We are smack dab in the middle of holidays. And we do know events happen throughout the year, but there's always a little bit more heaviness, as in there's just more of them around the Christmas season. And I believe that as clinicians, not only is our job to obviously help our clients with the actual physical rehabilitation of what we do, but being educators to help give them tools and strategies to thrive in their lives while they're moving through this concussion journey. And so, if you are listening to this, whether you're a clinician or someone on a journey, I hope you find this episode helpful because we're going to be talking about my concept of when you're planning to go to an event, thinking of it like a storyboard. Okay, so I've taught this concept a few different times. Well, I teach it every year, actually, typically around this time. And it can be a really helpful way for you to take something you would like to attend that the idea of attending the whole evening sounds quite overwhelming and being able to break it down into smaller chunks and smaller components so that you can still participate at the intensity, at the frequency that works for you. And so when I say attending an event or thinking of an event like a storyboard, what do I mean? Well, when someone's planning out a book, right? Or if they're planning out a movie or planning out an event, right? We have the introduction, we have the main plot, we have the conclusion. Now, obviously, in actual movie planning or actual book planning, there's more stages. But for our purposes here, let's take it that way, right? So we have the big story. The big story gets broken down to its smaller pieces. We have our introduction where we meet all the characters. We have our main, like, intense, like, moment. And then we have our conclusion. And so let's use those concepts when we think about an event. Now, something that is super common at this time of year, being the holidays, is Christmas parties, right? So let's use a Christmas party and break it down like a storyboard. That introduction, okay? The introduction in the storyboard is typically where we start to meet the characters. It's usually, besides sometimes when there's a big hook, it might be a bit of a slower paced warm up into the bigger story. So the introduction part of an event or of a Christmas party might be that early happy hour, right? In society, we like to be fashionably late, but instead, what if we were like smack dab on time? Right? The beginning of the event might be a little bit more intimate. There might be less people as people are starting to come in. It might provide you more opportunity to have more connected conversations with less noise around you, for example, and less visual stimuli, right? So that introduction of the event might be the first hour before like a dinner, before dancing or whatever it is, right? And so you might get this invitation to your friend's Christmas party and you might be like, okay, I can do the happy hour piece. That's the part I can do. The main event might be the dinner, right? Or it might be where there's a live band coming in, or it might be where there's dancing. The main event is typically going to be, or the main plot line is typically going to be the most stimulating part of the night, right? This is when you're going to have the most people. This is when you're going to have the most noise. This is when you're going to have the most stimulation in that time frame. It's probably also going to be the longest chunk of time. Now, that doesn't mean you have to stay for the whole thing, but it's typically going to be the longest chunk of time. Then we have the conclusion, right? So, in my favorite movies of the rom coms, I've shared this before. I am like Hallmark Christmas movies are my jam. They are my favorite thing this time of year, of which I'm sadly, side note, totally disappointed because I don't have cable. And so usually at this time of the year comes the Hallmark channel as well that I could just watch Christmas movies on repeat. And there's not a lot of new rom-coms showing up on my Netflix for Christmas this year. So I'm a little bit sad. And I've seen almost all of them over the years that are on currently on Netflix, which is just, we'll let that speak for itself. But that conclusion piece is always that piece where they come back together and they find love and joy and all those pieces. It's a feel good, slower part of the storyline, right? There's not big drama, there's not big things happening. And so, in terms of a dinner party event, that's like the dessert hour. That is the coffee, that is the tea in most cases, right? And so, this is also when people start to trickle out earlier. This just goes to show my age, but I'm just like, I want to be home by 9. But this is when people are starting to trickle out earlier. Again, there's less people. It provides the opportunity to have more intimate conversations again. So there's the conclusion or like the dessert part. So, what I would encourage you, step number one, is when you get this invitation to a dinner party or a Christmas event or whatever it is, can you take that event and can you break it into its components? What would be the introduction of this event? What would be the main part of this event? And what would be the conclusion of this event? Because then when you have that, you can see that each segment of this storyboard is going to require different demands on yourself. And you get to decide which part you would like to attend. Here's the key. You need to pre-communicate this with the host. Or I should say, I heavily suggest you pre-communicate this with the host. Because what I don't want you to have to do is when you're in that event is feel guilty for leaving early or feel like you have to explain yourself in the moment as opposed to just saying goodbye. And so what do I mean by pre-communicating with your host? If I'm your host and I've invited you to a dinner party, it might look something like, "Hey, Natasha, I got your invitation. I just want you to know I'm really excited to see you and wish you a Merry Christmas. I just wanted you to know I'm only going to be able to attend for the first hour, and then I'm just going to have to excuse myself after." Done. You don't have to explain yourself. And so then when you go to the event, you've already told the host or told me that you're going to leave early. So I know not to plan for you. It's a big thing. I know not to keep asking you to stay. I can respect the boundaries that you have set. And when you come, I can appreciate and make an appointed effort because I also know that you're only going to be there for the first hour to make sure that we get some time to connect. So, in you setting your boundary for the duration of the time you plan to be there. Now, if you do end up spilling over and staying later, amazing. But by you pre setting that boundary and communicating that with me, it also helps me ensure that I can make time for you. It's reciprocal. And then at the end of that hour, you can simply look at me or your host and say, "This has been absolutely lovely. I'm going to slip out now. I hope you have an amazing rest of your night." And then you leave. You don't have to explain why you have to leave. You don't have to feel bad because you're leaving. You've preset the stage. You've preset the expectations. And now you're following through for yourself. So you got to enjoy part of the event. You got to make those connections and you get to leave. Now let's talk about some strategies. We're going to keep this episode's going to be so nice. It's such a short and sweet episode. But let's talk about some strategies that can help set you up for success when you are in an environment like this. Should you choose to attend any part of it or the whole thing or the main event, that choice is yours. But let's talk about some tools and some strategies. I am very much a person that believes that you can utilize a tool to help you get the most out of something so that you can enjoy it. Not every moment of your life needs to be a rehab exercise. So let's just put that out there right away. Right? There are absolutely sometimes there are people out there like, "Well, I'm doing this. I should try and expose myself to noise." Sure, sometimes, but not every moment of your life, if you are on this journey, needs to be an exercise for you. Okay. So, in an event like this, when you are going to enjoy time with friends and the holiday season, please use strategies to help you enjoy it the most you possibly can. What might some of those strategies be? They might be using earplugs, right? So the loop earplugs are a huge client favorite of mine. They have different levels of sound filtering, but they don't block out noise. So they can filter different background noises. They can filter different decibels noises. There's a whole bunch of options on their website and they look cute. Whoever thought they'd say an earplug looked cute, but it looks cute. for the ladies listening to this, anyways. Get your loop earplugs and use those, right? When you're in the room, it's a little bit different for everybody, but sometimes some people feel safer so that where you are sitting, you have a more neutral background behind you versus facing the entire room and having a lot of visual stimuli. Other people prefer to have the wall at their back so they have something that they can actually lean against you to have some postural support, or a chair that they can sit in so you have some postural support so you can focus on the conversation in front of you. If you're sitting at the dinner table, sit at the end of a table so you have people in front of you, which will then, especially if you're someone with vestibular symptoms, you will have to decrease the amount of rotation and head turns and back and forth. It also decreases the number of directions that sound is coming at you to process because everything would be in front of you. Now, that may for some be too visually stimulating, but again, this is where we get to trial and error based on what works for you. Now, if you are somebody who you think would be better towards the end of a table. So again, everyone can be in front of you. Sound is localized in front of you. It's less movement and rotation. That would absolutely be something you wanted to communicate with your host prior to the event, especially if it's a sit down dinner, right? And give them a little context, giving yourself breaks. So if you're going to a home or you're going to a venue, making yourself familiar when you get there with where there might be a quiet nook. Is there an office you can slip into or the bathroom? Where is the bathroom that you can sneak into that when you start to feel yourself elevate or activate beyond where is comfortable, that you can sneak away to and you can do some palming or you can do some breath work, right? We've talked about palming a lot on this podcast already, and it's because it's one of the most powerful tools you can have to immediately bring your symptoms down. If this is the first podcast you're listening to, palming, friction your hands in front of you so you get some warmth in them, so they're not ice cold like mine currently are. You make 2 little cups with your hands, you place them over your eyes like a seal, and you do some breathing. It is one of the most powerful things to bring your symptoms down. You would palm for probably 2 minutes, and you could do that cycle a couple times if you needed to. So be aware of where, so either the bathroom is or a quiet nook or a quiet room that you can just escape into if you need to let yourself settle back down. Pay attention to yourself. Okay. We talk a lot here about connecting back to your own body and your own nervous system and being aware of the signs that you might need to help yourself regulate. So I was just at an event with some amazing, amazing humans, and 2 individuals that I was speaking to actually shared they struggle with noise sensitivity. And one of the phenomenal individuals there has learned for themselves that when sound starts to get greater than 80 decibels, and so Apple Watch measures this, I learned, and then it'll measure sound. And so this person has learned that when sound starts to get greater than 80 decibels, they start to get dysregulated. They start to feel the symptoms of dysregulation come on in their body. And so they know when that happens that they step away, they go do some breathing and they give themselves some space, and then they go back and they can continue to enjoy the evening. Versus if they ignored that cue, it would push them into symptomology or dysregulation sooner, and they would no longer enjoy their evening or have to leave sooner as well. So again, everything coming back to acknowledging your body and when those signs and those signals, what are those little yellow flags or those little yellow bells that tell you you just need to take a moment to yourself to reground to then come back and enjoy. This has been a tool that has been really powerful for a lot of my clients. It's what has allowed them to engage more in the Christmas season. It's also what's allowed them to look at this element and just say, you know what? I'm going to pass. Because once they break it down into the components, it still feels a little too overwhelming. Or again, they get to celebrate that win of being like, I can go, but I'm going to do this. It is a beautiful practice in communication. It is a beautiful practice in setting boundaries for yourself. And it is a beautiful practice in just being aware of yourself as well. So, if you are given an invitation, obviously I always talk about it in terms of the holiday season, but we can use this for any event, any time of the year. Take that event, break it into its storyboard. What is the introduction? What is the main event? What is the conclusion? You can break it down more if you need to, especially if it's something like a wedding and has very clear, distinct components to that event. Break it into those components. What are the demands within each of those components? And which part of that do you want to step into? I hope you found this strategy helpful. For clinicians, this is a really great one to help our clients with so that they can engage in activities more in life, find laughter, find joy, find play as they're going through your rehab plans. And for those of you on your journeys, I hope you found this empowering to help you make a more clear decision on how to attend something in your life that you might want to attend. Until next week, my friends, we will see you soon. That's today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked what you heard, give us a like, give us a share, give us a tag on Instagram, and please never hesitate to reach out. We love communicating and connecting with you. Until next week, my friends, have a marvelous day.